I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
And welcome everybody to the Libertarian Podcast Review. This is a little special edition. We're going live tonight. Truckers out there, beware. Let's bring them into the studio. Reed Coverdale. I think I control this thing. Reed Coverdale. I put up online today. I said, hey, let's do an impromptu, podcast host. Let's bring you out. No one responded. You did late. I really appreciate that. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, where are you at right now? I know you've been kind of traveling around. What part of the States, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I'm actually home in Utah right now. I'm going to be gone this coming weekend, so my boss is kind of keeping me local. So I'll probably be home every night this week, which is pretty rare, but it's probably the deal.
So, quick question here. Truck stops. Is it the gay hookup that everyone says? I know it's not for you, but I mean, do you run into people out there like something about Mary?
I kind of stay out of everyone's business. I don't really look around and ask. I mean, if you've ever been to a busy truck stop at night, it's I don't know. It's not the most welcoming environment. I tend to just get my food and go do a podcast or something and go to bed. So I try to. I make a lot of jokes about lot lizards and things like that. But a truck stop's the last place you want to literally get anything, let alone sexual favors or something like that. It's a pretty disgusting area. The mask mandates in the bathrooms. When those were happening, they didn't really need the mask mandate. That's kind of recommended anyway.
Right. So people don't know. You're a long haul trucker or a big haul trucker? What is the technical term? And maybe you could break a little bit of that down.
Yeah, sure. I do heavy haul, which is moving oversized equipment.
Uh-huh.
So we'll move some other random oversized things that aren't heavy equipment, but like 98% of it's machinery. And I do all the Western states. So pretty much from the Rocky Mountains west, I go to any state. And then occasionally we'll go to Texas, and then really, really rarely we'll go like all the way out east, but we mostly just stay in the West because the regulations and the customers we have are they're just easier to deal with out here.
Do you have to, so you don't do a long sections so the truck stops and all that stuff really aren't, and I know I'm kind of making jokes here, but that's really not much of a problem for you then. It's shorter distances, big hauls.
Well, I mean, I'm in a truck stop a lot, like all over the West. I mean, I'm usually only home on the weekends. This is just a weird week. But yeah, I don't know. Truck stops, it depends on where you are. Some of them are nice and they're not that bad, but Southern California, and then Nevada, they have a lot of really shitty truck stops that I've heard of a couple that you want to stay out of, like in Denver. I think it's on the east side of Denver. You don't really want to stay in any of those
city area over there.
Yeah. So I don't know. You just kind of learn which ones are nice and which ones are shitty, and then you try to aim for the nice ones. So.
Well, so the reason I've been asking some of this, I mean, obviously you do trucking, but watching your early videos. So I do podcast reviews, right? And I make a joke about kind of finding that autistic Liberty Star. I don't think you're autistic. You maybe want to claim that but you do podcasts, and going back through some of your old ones there. I mean, I assume you're doing them from the cab of your truck or like the sleeping bed area or something like that. Is that break down the whole back there, your internet connection, what you're having to do with that, because sometimes you're fading out and you're in. I mean, I think it's maybe you're upgrading your studio a little bit, but what was it to begin with, and what is it now?
Yeah, so I mean, in my house, I have a green screen. I got Wi-Fi, but when I'm on the road, sometimes I'm just using my phone. Like if I'm solo and I'm just talking about, sometimes I'll just do a rant for 40 minutes about something. That'll be on my phone. But then when I'm doing an actual podcast, I usually bring my laptop with me, and then I just use the hotspot on my cell phone. And sometimes it works great. Like my interview with Tom Woods was off of hotspot. That went fine. And I've done several of them that went really well. But sometimes you're in a truck stop where you've got like 3 bars of LTE or 3G or something, and you're just, it's in and out. You'll lag. But I've kind of made that the persona of the show, like it's almost expected. Oh, something is going to go wrong here, you know. So I've joked that you set the bar low, and then you can meet it every time you do an episode, you know. So I don't know. People have tolerated it so far, so I'm gonna keep that trajectory as long as I can, I think.
Yeah, why not? Did you have so when you first started doing this, totally from your phone, or did you get a mic to go with any of this recording stuff set up, or not? Or you just straight to YouTube, I guess?
Yeah, actually, my first like 10 episodes were before I got my job, because I was in between jobs. It was I lived in New Hampshire and I was doing line work, and then I quit that in December of 2019. And then it wasn't until June of 2020 that I got my job out here in Utah. So there was like this big gap, and COVID extended what that gap was supposed to be. But I was actually living with my aunt and uncle in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, and I was helping them build a house up in the mountains. And so my first like 10 episodes were just from that room. And we had really, really shaky service. So every single video was pre-recorded on Skype. And then when I moved out to Utah, I started doing them occasionally from the truck, and then some from home. And then I eventually, the beginning of this year, I started going live. I think it wasn't until like March that I finally figured out how to do that efficiently. And I've done almost every show live since March.
Oh, okay. So you've done some pretty amazing interviews, I think, in at least some of the people you've got in there. You did them early on. How did you go about just like snagging some of these people? Was it just like reaching out? Because I know look, you're coming on here with me. You've got 6,000 subs on YouTube, big Twitter following, and so I'm able to get Reed on here, which is nice. And I got, Pete Quinones and Clint and stuff. So, and the Liberty movement's kind of avails themselves to this, but how did you first decide that, hey, this is what I'm going to do as far as grabbing these people? And then how did you find them?
Well, yeah, I mean, at first I was just talking with random people on Twitter and some friends that I had. But then what I decided I wanted to do is interview libertarian candidates for Congress and state positions. So this was last year, because no one was doing it. I mean, Larry Sharp was doing it. Right. And there's one other guy. He runs like a libertarian candidates account on Facebook or something. Those two guys were like the only ones interviewing all these people. And I was like, wow, maybe these guys would be willing to come on my show. So, I got like Justin O'Donnell and John Molnar, Elliot Sherman, who I regret now. I didn't realize what an idiot he was back in the day. But, that
answers my question. The worst interview, I guess, then.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he seemed all right back then, but man, like a lot of people say that, like he was okay. And then they said he kind of just snapped and became deranged. But I had like, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 libertarian candidates on. And I got Vermin Supreme on for an interview, which was kind of cool. And it was a serious interview. I was actually trying to get into what he really believed, and that was cool. And then I got Spike Cohen when he was the VP candidate. So that was cool. But then nothing really took off until January of 2021. And then I became friends with Dave Smith. And that was all just from being in the right tweet at the right time, coming across him. And he and Jeremy Todd and David Fight and I kind of all ended up becoming friends. And we did a video together. And then Dave got me connected to Tom Woods, and he gave me tons of publicity, just like retweeting my stuff. And from there, it just took off. And so I just started reaching out, trying to grab everyone I could who would be willing to come on, and made it all the way to Peter Schiff this past week, that was amazing. Like, that's a big guest for me right now. Like that was just a shot in the dark. I just sent him a message on Instagram, and he read it and then just sent it to his secretary, and he contacted me. So I don't know. I mean, there's been stuff like that. There's been complete shots in the dark where I just try and someone will be like, yeah, sure. And then other times it's just because once you know someone, they know someone else and they can connect you. So it seems to mostly be who you know instead of what you know. And you just got to be really aggressive, and just, you miss every shot you don't take. So might as well go as high as you can, and you never know if they'll say yes or not.
Yeah. And then when you get one, and then you say, hey, Tom Woods was on there, then Peter Schiff's like, oh yeah, Tom used to sub in for me, I better do this. So, the ball starts rolling. preparing for Peter Schiff, I mean, I'm no economist, and I saw that interview, by the way. It was really good. And I don't know, look, you've got, I kind of made a joke with you on Twitter the other day. You've got Ryan Dawson, Scott Horton, and Peter Schiff are kind of wind-up doll interviews, right? You maybe throw one question and they just go for quite some time. You had great questions there for Peter. Did you do research for this? I mean, or did you just kind of, you're just reading, you just kind of know stuff?
Well, I've been listening to Peter Schiff pretty religiously for a while. So I know very well what it is he believes and what he talks about. So that was the first interview I wrote questions down for in months. I mean, it's been so long. Yeah. Like pretty much every interview, I just go cold turkey, and I like to have organic conversations, just see where they go. So before we went live, he only had like half an hour. So I told him, hey man, I've got 6 questions I want to ask. So if you could just limit your answer to 5 minutes. And he kind of laughed. Right. But he's way easier to interview than Ryan Dawson. I think Ryan Dawson's like the hardest out of the 3 of them. Probably Ryan, and then Scott, and then Pete.
Is that because Ryan's more like herding cats in a sense, where you throw something and he goes and then he finds his way to another rabbit hole and another one, or why is he more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, he's hard to like keep on one subject. I mean, I love Ryan; he's a good friend. But I mean, if you ask him about one thing, he will just go like, he'll bring that to the next line, and then the next thing, then it's like, whoa, Ryan, let's stay on this thing. And then because I mean, he's probably the smartest guy I've had on the show, I would say. Ryan, I mean, he has so much information in there that I think it's hard for him to just like stick to one thing, because it's all connected, and his mind just goes all these places. But I think having him on so many times probably did kind of prepare me for Peter Schiff in a way. I was thinking that before I had him on, because you're right, with any of those guys, you could just say like one word and let them go for 3 hours, and they wouldn't need any notes. They wouldn't need any prompts. They could just keep talking and talking and talking and talking. So it's kind of amazing.
Do you ever listen to Scott Horton's, his own podcast and interviews?
Yeah, sometimes.
I actually think that for me, it's one of my favorite, because he is asking the questions, and he's got amazing questions. And, sometimes when he's on a show, he goes for so long, you kind of like, okay, someone break it up, just kind of, move the ball a little bit different spot. And actually the interview, and by the way, you did one with Nick Gillespie. I actually thought Nick did a great interview with him, because Scott goes and he stopped him and then had something to say. And it was a much different type of interview. Are there people out there that you've had to pulling teeth to get to say something, spend an hour with them, and then it's a struggle?
Man,
you don't have to point anybody
not
out.
Anyone like big. There was one guy, I'm just not going to name him because I don't want to embarrass him, but he did come on, and it was just really like, I don't know, the interview just really fell flat. He didn't have much to say. And he had been begging me for weeks to come on the show. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll have you on. And then he came on, and it was just really kind of bland. But no one really important. Pretty much everyone important that I've had on has always had something to say. And we usually run out of time before we can even get everything covered. So that's why I like doing the 4 horsemen videos, because they're 2 hours long, and it can just like go and go and go. I mean, you could have those for 8 hours, but I really like the drawn out conversations where you really get rolling and you really get into some deep content, because that's lacking in today's media. Even on a show like Bill Maher's show, where they kind of get into things more than a regular TV show, it's still not enough time. You need a couple hours usually.
Yeah, and that still feels really scripted. Where when you're doing the thing, the Brady Bunch look there, it's just. And by the way, the people you had, they're all engaging, and it seems like it's friends. So I'm sure that makes a much better difference as well, because you can jab each other. So who have you had the 4 different times? Now, by the way, let me just back up. My first interaction seeing your videos actually was when Dave was on there. Dave Smith, is it David Fight or Will Fight? There's 2 fights. David Fight. And then there was one other guy. Jeremy Todd. Okay. And I love that you drew me into your camp immediately there. And then I saw the 4 horsemen that you've had there. Maybe go back and just explain a little bit about the unity thing, because I know that's still, I don't know if it's contentious, but it seems like, when I first saw, and I saw you on Twitter messing around with Dave, and it was very well done. There was, unicorns and unity. And now I see you posting on Twitter and it's not quite the same. So what was your goal at the time and what has it gone to?
Well, actually, I don't think really anything has changed. I was always shit posting. I've definitely like ramped it up a bit in the recent months, but you can ask people who were following me last year, and that's always been an element. What I was getting sick of was people who were just doing nothing but fighting other libertarians because it's counterproductive and it's over stupid shit usually. And it's also really low hanging fruit. Like if you're making fun of Lolberts, doesn't that get boring after like 2 weeks? I mean, because they're so pathetic. They're just not interesting. It's like arguing with, really dumb liberals or something. It's just not, it's not interesting. So if you've noticed who I go after, like I try to punch up, and I end up getting in these arguments with pretty high profile people. And I end up on these lists. Like I've been on Siraj's list. I've been on bad COVID-19 takes. I've been on bad HIPAA takes, bad libertarian, like pretty much every list I've made it onto. And it's because I don't argue with Archie Flower. I mean, he blocked me anyway. So, and well, I guess what we were trying to do was draw high profile people away from getting bogged down by parasites because the only reason any of those people had any publicity or had any gravity to what they said is because the big guys would stoop to their level and argue with them. And it was just counterproductive. So after Joe Jorgensen did so horribly and we lost the election, David Fite, Jeremy Todd, and I, we were like, all right, we want libertarians to kind of be united and start punching outward, against the actual tyranny that's happening, against the COVID regulations, against the wars, against the Fed, against the war on drugs, all this shit, instead of arguing about transgender bathrooms or whatever. And Dave got into some altercation with us on Twitter, and then we all just started talking it out throughout the Twitter feed. And he was like, oh, I actually really like what these guys are saying. So he reached out to us through a private message and asked, hey, what are you guys all about? And we kind of told him, and he's like, oh, I'm all about this. So then we did that episode you're talking about. And I think it kind of succeeded because we were really worried about like Dave Smith and Spike Cohen and Justin Amash all being at odds because they have slightly different approaches to messaging. And I've seen like the important people kind of brush all that aside and realize, hey, we're united in fighting for liberty, and that's what we care about. So if you have stupid, like parasitic retards just, constantly biting at people's ankles, they're always going to do that. And I feel like they've become irrelevant. I guess Jose Gallison was the latest guy to really put the nail in the coffin on them with the whole block Sarwark, block Archie thing. And that really solved the problem. Like I haven't seen a Sarwark tweet in weeks or Archie or whatever. And so most of the fighting, I want it to be facing outward against the people who actually matter, because Archie doesn't matter. Nick Sarwark doesn't matter. And, I feel like they've been given plenty of chances to cut it out and join the ranks and just put the bullshit behind them, but they don't. And I feel like everyone can see that now. I feel like before January, when Dave and us became friends, it wasn't really obvious to some of the newcomers, and I was a newcomer to the party, who was stirring up the shit and who was causing the problems. And over the last few months, this has been extremely obvious. Like, hey, we want to advance liberty. And then as I call them, the bitch fuck cucks, they're the ones who are like, no, we want to steal the New Hampshire Libertarian Party. No, we want to argue about homophobia. We want to argue about this. And they're just so ridiculous. So I think anyone who's serious about this fight that we're in has kind of realized they're irrelevant, left them behind. So, once you get past the point of uniting, you've got to move on to something else. And that's what I'm doing now. Like the reason I started my show was to try to break down these barriers that are built up that kind of separate us and make us think of each other as enemies, and make people actually think about why they believe what they believe. So I feel like the unity thing doesn't even need to be talked about anymore. So I've kind of gotten back to just doing that at this point.
now solid stuff there. So what do you make of, and maybe you're not following it, and I know you are actually, probably, Jason Stapleton and Matt Erickson, is that his name? Yeah, I think Matt Erickson, kind of like trying to say that don't take the political Mises Caucus route, and which kind of, I mean, your unity is talking about kind of, is it the political side, or is it just kind of the liberty side? What do you make of them doing their thing?
I think, I know more about, I mean, I've been more involved with Matt Erickson more recently, or not involved, but paying attention to him more. And I think he's kind of obnoxious. Who's the other guy? Cyprian or whatever his name is?
Vin Armani. Yeah.
Like he's really obnoxious. But I don't care. Like Matt and Jason, I think they should do their thing, but I don't know why they have to constantly criticize people for being politically involved. I think the point that they have is don't just be politically involved. If you can better yourself, you should do that too.
Right.
And I totally agree with that. But I don't understand the constant belittling of political involvement. The same for like from Sal the Agorist and people like that. It's like you guys got involved with this because of Ron Paul's presidential campaign. So it's so hypocritical to say that political action is meaningless and doesn't affect people, doesn't bring people in, because that's how you got started. So, I think it's important to better yourself financially and make yourself independent, but also to be involved and try to wake more people up, because odds are that's how you got drawn in at some point. So I don't see why they should be at odds. And it feels like they're the ones who are choosing to be at odds with us, because I don't feel like any of us were criticizing Jason or Vin or any of these people for what they're doing, but they are constantly screaming at us for doing what we're doing. So I don't know. I think they should just cut it out, do their own thing. And if you don't want to be politically involved, then don't be, but stop like tearing people down who are trying to make a difference.
I listen. Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think they have a lot of valid comments. So I listened to Matt today because he had on Pete Quinones, and then they were going on for a while. And I actually asked him a question. I was like, so, because I haven't listened to everything they said, but kind of the gist, when I'm slamming the Mises Caucus, which was Jason was saying, which I'm like, this is an honest question. But if you actually try to remove yourself from politics, aren't you kind of venturing into Ancapistan in itself? Politics aren't going to leave you alone. And, they came back and say, no, you don't leave, you don't just ignore the guy out there with the gun. I get it. Okay. But maybe it's the method of coming at people so harsh about they're really kind of pushing the religious angle that they have, which is fine. I'm religious myself. I know you're not, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit, but it's very off-putting to me, the way that they're saying that those that do want to be in politics, or those that, following along with this, are just kind of mind-numbed robots. And I'm like, a lot of the libertarians aren't, and that's kind of why they're in this state. And I see this as more, not a religion, but as a community, which could be like a religious community that at this point is very important. Just at my daughter's volleyball game tonight, and, the mask mandate, and I had a bike wreck recently and have a little trouble breathing, and I didn't want to put a mask on. So I got kicked out of the gym. And I'm like, no one's really standing up for this stuff anymore. And it's, these kind of communities, my buddies, Liberty Ones Online, are the ones kind of giving support. I don't know. I just kind of ranted off there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there needs to be a culture around liberty, and it doesn't need to be right wing or left wing or religious or non-religious or whatever. Like there is a culture to defiance and a culture to independence, and I think that can be really a uniting force. And I think you're right. Like, it's good to have this community where other people think the same way, because it's sort of like going to church. If you're a religious person, like you go there to bounce your ideas off other people and to try to improve your own life and hear other people's testimonies or whatever. It's sort of similar. Whatever community you're part of, if you're into bowling or if you're into shooting or whatever, like you're going to hang out with those types of people to try to improve your own journey in whatever, field it is. So I agree with you.
And I would just say, just like all those things you're talking about, sometimes those communities are necessary because there's a binding thing that you have, like, Liberty, Rothbard, or your church, or bowling. But the reality is if that's all you're talking about in those communities, that's a little boring, and you're probably, you're maybe just a surface friend, because it's deeper than that. I watch you guys on the Tower Gang, and it's not, just liberty stuff. It's just BS and fun. And that is where you build your community. Those guys are going to be out there helping you change your tire or do, well, maybe not, but anyway, so it's important stuff. Let's go back to some of your video stuff. So the Four Horsemen, you've got, explain what that is to people that may not know. And then what's your goal every time you do that? Do you have one in mind, or is it just kind of like a random thing?
Yeah, so that was born organically. The way I actually got connected to Ryan is through the Jackman brothers. So Eric Jackman's the guy who's always on there. Mike Jackman, I've also had on my show a couple times, and he's been around a little bit too. But it just started. I was like, hey, why don't we ask Ryan if he'll come on with both of you guys? And because I'd had him on once alone by himself back in January, I think. And then in March, we were like, hey, let's the four of us just do a show. So we did it. And it was actually a technical disaster. I was getting kicked off the stream every 5 minutes. My service wasn't holding up. It was horrible. But then we decided, hey, let's do the next one with Pete Quinones. And so Pete agreed to do it. And so there were going to be 5 of us, but then Mike Jackman ended up getting sick and he didn't make it on. And so then we realized, actually, 4 is a really good number. And this is a kind of good dynamic with me just kind of putting this together and kind of directing the conversation a little bit, with Eric doing all the impersonations, keeping everyone laughing. And then Ryan, just bringing his autism and genius to the show, it's just like, it's a good mix. So we decided we'll just rotate whoever that 4th person is, and we'll just do it once a month. And they're 2 hours long because we get in nothing scripted. Sometimes there's not even a subject. Like the latest one was Sean Atwood. We didn't even have like a central subject to the conversation. It was just like, hey, let's just see how it goes and run with it. I think that is just like complete uncut, deep conversation where everything is so organic that you accidentally say something really genius, because it seems like if you're trying too hard to say something, or if you have an idea of what you're trying to say, sometimes that's not as conducive to something that's really profound. Usually the really profound things come out accidentally. And there's been a lot of those moments, when you have all these great minds together, because we've had Pete, Dave Smith, Scott Horton, Clint from Liberty Lockdown, Sean Atwood, someone else. I don't know. I think we've had 6 of them now. So the conversations in there are just really deep, and people love it. Like, people want me to do it once a week, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to do it once a month because I know they crave it and they look forward to it. And it's kind of the biggest thing about my show right now, I'd say, is just doing that once a month. And it's cool. I love doing it because I don't feel like there is another Liberty show that has something like that going, that people look forward to and is so spontaneous and crazy. Yeah.
No, I've really enjoyed it. And I'm going to put up here in a little bit, kind of who you have coming on. Well, why don't we just share this right here? Okay, so you posted this out. This is who you have coming up here in the next month. Why don't you walk through these and tell me a little bit about each one of them? I think I probably know, but I'd like to hear your point of view. Can you see that?
Sure. Yeah, so tomorrow is Jacob Winograd, who's the Biblical Anarchy show. And that's going to be interesting. We're not going to argue about religion. I'm just going to ask him about how you can come to anarchy through a biblical perspective. So that should be interesting. Dak Rouleau is someone that I had on a lot last year, and I've had him on a few times this year, but he runs Overwritten Report, and he actually exposed all the Democratic candidates in 2020. He asked pretty much all of them what their position was on Julian Assange, and Tulsi Gabbard is the only one that gave a satisfactory answer. And I met him in New Hampshire on the Tulsi Gabbard campaign. So we became friends, and I have him on once a month right now, and I go on his show once a month. Justin O'Donnell and Joe Evans, they're going to come on Saturday to talk about the war in Afghanistan, because they both served in Afghanistan. And now that we're out of there, we'll see what happens over the next few days. But I just want to get their reflections on it. And then Drew Hancock on the 7th. I'm going to have him on to talk about actually being based, because I think he actually is, and some people think they are and they're not. So being
Yeah.
based means like sticking to your values and saying something that you believe is true when it's not popular necessarily. And so many of these shit posters, they think that they're independently minded or that they're saying what they think, but there actually is a bunch of peer pressure in the shit posting community too. Like if you say something that they don't agree with, like they'll eviscerate you and spit you out. I mean, it's it's kind of ugly. So there are there are people like Drew who really just say what they think all the time. And then
Before you go on, I brought this off because I wanted to actually talk about Drew real quick. Yeah, the kid is, I mean, how old are you, by the way?
27.
20, Jesus, you guys. I've got a son who's 21. Okay. And, he's not Drew Hancock. He's not based like that. He's a good kid. My kids are I've always said I have 4 kids, 15 to 21, and I'm teaching them, and they're doing a really good job of being really skeptical, not cynics, but skeptical kids. But I used to think I was creating leaders, but at this point, I think I'm creating criminals. That's just, they're independent enough and push back. But Drew, you're so right about that. I'm glad you said what based was. I was like, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm an old guy, old boomer. He, just his idea, disagree however you want. He came to a different conclusion last week about abortion. Okay. And people could check out his Twitter for that. And that's something exactly what you're saying. He got a lot of shit for it. And it's, and then before that, he was defending open borders very strongly, but he does it in a way that, one, if you disagree with him, you're not going to be left out. He doesn't like kick you out, but he's got his own mentality and he's coming to these conclusions on his own. Then he went on Austin Peterson's radio show, and he talked about it, and I just give him all kinds of credit for what he's doing. Before we go on too, I want to talk, you said O'Donnell and Joe for Congress, they're going to come on and talk about, actually, no, the one before that, Jack, how do you say his name? Yeah. So you mentioned about Tulsi. You had worked on the Tulsi campaign, is that correct?
Yes.
And she's going to be coming on your show?
Yeah, she's still on active duty, and apparently she doesn't actually know when she's getting off, and she's been on for 4 months right now, and I don't even know where she is, but she's overseas somewhere. So whenever she gets off duty, she's going to contact me and set up a date. So I talked to her media director like 3 months ago, and she had said she thought it was going to be like toward the end of the summer sometime. But she's still on active duty, so I don't actually have a date for that yet, but she'll get with me when she gets off.
Is she like she seems? And the reason I say that is because she's, the war part was very good, and she really pushed back against Hillary Clinton, and everyone just embraced her for that. But then she ends up doing things that I like about her, which is she's friendly about going on right-wing podcasts. I think she's Steven Crowder. She went on with Glenn Beck, and she was respectful and, disagreement, but has a great conversation. And it makes someone like me that probably disagrees with a bunch of things with her. Hey, I like that, because in the real world, I have friends, and you probably do too, that don't agree with you on everything, and you're friends. And she seems more like that kind of person.
Yeah. Yeah, she is. Yeah. She's a very human person. I'll put it that way. Like, I mean, if you lined her up next to everyone else who was running in 2020, they were just so reptilian and disgusting and unrelatable. And, that's part of the reason I supported her. The other thing, though, is it's kind of inaccurate, but a lot of people think she was good on war and nothing else, where war actually wasn't even her best position, because she just did a video actually about Afghanistan and how Al-Qaeda is like a huge threat to us. And and so many people were shocked, and I wasn't, because I know her, and she always talked about how she was a dove on regime change, but a hawk on terror. The big difference between her and everybody else was that she did not want to arm Al-Qaeda. She didn't want to give weapons to terrorists, which is a pretty important difference. Like Bernie Sanders would act like he was anti-war, but he was one of these Assad must go people, arm the moderate rebels, which was Al-Qaeda. So she was better than everyone else on war, but she was also really good on, surveillance and the drug war. And most of the Constitution. Obviously, there was a couple amendments she wasn't very good on, but most of the Constitution and what the president's actual authority was. And then she was also good on things like school choice, and she had pretty moderate views on abortion, things like that. So she was just a very interesting person. I don't regret supporting her or any of the time I spent on that campaign. I did lose a little bit of respect for her when she endorsed Joe Biden, and then when
Yeah.
she went kind of you know, um, full bore with the COVID stuff, that really disappointed me too. But I don't know. She did a couple things in Congress before she left after the presidential campaign that really made me proud. She did she introduced 3 pieces of legislation to repeal the Espionage Act, to free Julian Assange, and to pardon Edward Snowden.
Right.
And Thomas Massey co-sponsored a couple of those. She introduced a bill to repeal the Patriot Act. She also voted. She was one of 2 Democrats to vote against that god awful spending bill right before Christmas.
Right.
So I mean, she's definitely a very interesting person who thinks for herself and doesn't really stick to any lines. So I'm really looking forward to get her on the show. I'm going to ask her some interesting questions. So that's probably going to be my biggest interview I've ever done once I get her on.
So I'm going to go back to your list, but you reminded me of something you tweeted out today. The government wants universal background checks, so I can't accidentally privately sell a gun to a felon, but they forcibly took my tax money and pumped weapons into Iraq that ended up in the hands of Al-Qaeda, and into Afghanistan that ended up in the hands of the Taliban.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you come up with things like this? That's a brilliant tweet. Come on, what did you say? 27 or?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just natural. I mean, you see, I put stuff up like that every day. It's just a gift I have. So, some of my tweets definitely push the line, and then some of them go over the line as far as like being offensive or whatever. But I do get messages from people telling me they appreciate that I say those things because they can't in their position. And some of these are people that we all know, that some would probably be surprised if they heard that they had messaged me this, but they do. And, then other people who are just in employment situations where they wouldn't be able to say stuff like that. So, I'm a truck driver. My boss is based. He doesn't care about my political opinions, so I can say whatever I want, and I'm going to keep doing that.
No, and I appreciate that. Back to, bring this back up here. This little shit lockout days.
Yeah.
He one of his videos, he's like, hey, just do something for liberty or whatever, and make videos. And I was like, that's when I started doing this thing. But when I'm talking even to Clint or what you're saying here, is not everybody has that ability to job wise to just go out and say what they want, and to make the big, especially the days we have now, the masks and on the vaccines, everything. You get canceled from your work and maybe lose your job. I have, I own my own law firm. It's not really a problem. HR is me. So, bring it on. And what you're doing. So I applaud people that are coming out and doing, the fighting in a sense. So I give credit to, I just do a stupid podcast here, but it sometimes. I was in Costco with my wife yesterday, and they made you take a mask. So I took a mask, just put it in my pocket, and we're walking around there. Everyone's masked up. And I'm in California, by the way. And some lady walks by and she has her mask. She pulls it down. She says, "Thank you." And she's like, big smile. And I was like, okay. So we gave her a little pump of bravery, I guess. How stupid that is. So, yeah. Okay. Then you have Dave Smith coming back on here then.
Yeah. Dave Smith and Jeremy Todd. We all got to hang out at Freedom Fest together. So we're just going to do like a recap on Liberty Unity, from January, and see where we think everything lies now. And then I got Pete Quinones coming on 9/11. And we're actually, I'm sure we'll talk about 9/11 a little bit since it's the day I'm having him on, but we're actually going to be talking about like this almost split that seems to be happening between religious and non-religious libertarians, which I think is ridiculous that it's happening. I think, I'm having Jacob Winograd on tomorrow. And I think that if you are a Christian anarchist who can make a compelling case for liberty, that's great, or if you're a fundamentalist Muslim and you can somehow make an argument for anarchy and libertarianism, like, I think that everyone should be using whatever angle they can to bring people in. And for some reason, it pisses people off if you're using religion or if you're using, atheism like I do sometimes, or whatever your shtick is. I don't think that people should be trying to shut each other down. I think that, we need every venue possible to bring as many of us together as we can, because there aren't a lot of us, so trying to split hairs over that is really dumb.
No, and I'll say so you and I probably have a similar earlier background, very religious. I mean, I went to, Christian schools all my life. But I still am. Okay. But I'm now an anarchist, and I should not be threatening you at all with my religiosity. Right.
Sure.
Just like libertarians never are much a threat anywhere, because, we're nonviolence and we're not going to take over anything. But I mean, that's the way it should be. And so you're right. You and I should have a lot together to coalesce on and be okay with. I'm not going to push my thing on you, and you're not going to push. And I've actually found in the anarchist sect, the ones that I like that are, I don't know what they are, their beliefs, and you find out they're atheists, and I'm like, yeah, but they don't have, I guess it's more along the lines of, I don't feel that they have disdain for my religious thoughts or beliefs as much as, left or right kind of does. I don't know. What's your place on that one?
So, the thing is, like, I make my own posts. I never have gone after anyone for making some religious post on Twitter. I don't think ever. I think I might have made a couple comments here and there, but for the most part, like, I'll make a post about religion, and then people will come out of the woodwork to tell me what a horrible person I am for daring to say this or whatever. And it's like, look, I don't have atheist in my bio. I've done like 2 or 3 videos on it on my channel out of like 150 episodes so far. And, a lot of like Christian anarchists, like, they have the cross and then some verse, and I don't care. Like, you do your thing. And, if you can bring people in your way, that's great. If I can bring people in my way, that's great. And yeah, I mean, there are things about Christianity that I think are ridiculous. And then there are things that Christians would think that I believe are ridiculous. They'd be like, what's this nothing from nothing stuff? Or what's this, Big Bang stuff or evolution that's retarded? That's so, that's fine. Like, that's not the battle that I really care about having right now, because, if you're someone who believes in the Tower of Babel, that's much less important to me than the fact that you believe the government has a right to tell me what I have to put in my body or what I'm not allowed to put in my body, or, whether or not we're going to war in Afghanistan. Or it's just like, I mean, you gotta put things into perspective, because you can look at it in other ways too. Like, if you're someone who is gay, or if you're someone who is more socially liberal or socially conservative, like, all these things just don't matter as much as the state's power over our lives right now. Because, I would have I'm actually a very personally conservative person. So some like really degenerate, like socially left person and I would probably disagree on a lot of societal personal subjects, but it doesn't matter, like, at all right now, and they can do their thing. Like, if they want to bring people to libertarianism through like degeneracy and whatever it is, like, okay, fine, that's you. Like, if heroin use is the way you want to recruit libertarians, like, fine, as long as you're recruiting them, I'm not going to get in the way of that. But don't expect me to support heroin use or talk about it like it's good, or, I'm going to have my own thoughts, but let's not let that get in between us. So, I don't think that you need to even respect other people's views, like on whatever it is. Like, you don't need to respect Christian views, Muslim views, atheist views, Jewish views, whatever. Like, all you need to do is tolerate them, and then realize, like, what's the bigger battle right now. And then, but when it comes to religion, like, I think just belittling other people and not willing to have those conversations is really dumb, because the only way I got where I am now is from listening to people who disagreed with me initially. So just dismissing people and demonizing them for having a different opinion is really dumb. So personally, I don't seek to just belittle people who disagree with me. I actually want to have interesting conversations, because even though I don't think it's nearly as important as allying against the state right now, I still think these ideas are why we are inspired to do what we do. So they're really important to talk about. And, everyone has a different life story and everyone's arrived where they are in a different way. So I'm always open to have those conversations and, wonder if I'm wrong because I think a lot of people, they don't actually want to know what's true. They're just worried about reconfirming their confirmation
Yeah.
bias.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. I want to know what's true. So I want to talk to everybody.
So the the libertarian angle through heroin, I think that's Nick Gillespie's. Have you heard? No, he does. On the whole subject, we can disagree with a lot that Ben Shapiro says, but he does make one argument consistently, which is he goes, I don't argue things from a religious perspective because it gets nowhere. It alienates some people, and you're not going to buy my point of view. So therefore, I don't do it from that perspective unless we're talking about religion. And that's, I think that's a great aspect of both ways, right? So, anyway, that's all I had on that one. Let's go back here and finish this off, kind of who you're bringing on. So you have, and then it looks like on the 18th, you're having another 4 horsemen, it looks like.
Yeah, and I actually don't know a ton about Mike Rivero, so I need to research him a little bit, but I think he knows a lot about 9/11. And that's a connection through Ryan. Ryan got us Sean Atwood, and he is also getting us Mike Rivero. He's also probably going to get us what's his name? I'm blanking on it right now. Man, sorry. I'll probably think of it later.
You'll come to it while we talk about Abby Martin. First of all, will she be the best looking guest that you've had, or is that?
So far, yeah. I mean, I guess it's a toss up between her and Tulsi when Tulsi finally comes on. But yeah, no, that's going to be really cool. That's also through Eric Jackman. He's had Abby Martin on his show, and he's good friends with her brother Robbie Martin.
Yeah.
And so she went on his show with his brother, and they had a pretty good episode. I think they were mostly talking about Israeli-Palestinian conflicts and, Israel's influence over our foreign policy, and then the CIA and all that stuff. So that's a lot of what I want to talk about with her when I get her on my show. But then she followed me on Twitter, and then I sent her a message and said I'd love to have her on. So that's going to be really cool. That's October 3rd. I'm looking forward to that. So a lot of people don't like this, but I relate better to leftists than conservatives in general, because I disagree with both leftists and conservatives on a lot, but I feel like good leftists who aren't like sold out to the COVID regime and, sold out to the war machine and everything. And I think Abby's like a really good leftist. She agrees on like the most important issues, which are war, surveillance, mass incarceration, like the things that really, really cause a lot of human harm. And I like completely disagree with her on economics.
Right.
But I feel like that's just less of an evil thing to disagree on, at least conceptually. I think in real life that has really big really big ramifications disagreeing on economics, because I think leftist economics enforced through the state are harmful to a lot of people. But I do think that in general, it's well intended, where a lot of the evil things that conservatives tend to believe in, it's harder to excuse away, like incarcerating people for drug use and deporting 11 million people because they came here illegally 30 years ago, or, going to war endlessly because USA, whatever. It's just like, they're more mindless, like evil things that they excuse away. So I tend to relate better, kind of like Ron Paul did with Dennis Kucinich, and how he would talk about how like real progressives are natural allies on these issues. And that makes a lot of people angry. I think that's the way I am, but
that's the way you are. I mean, have you got pushback by the fact that you're going to have her on the show?
Not so much her, but mostly that I supported Tulsi Gabbard. And I honestly don't think of Tulsi Gabbard as a far left person. And it's just because I know her really well. Like, she's kind of just all over the place. But the fact that I would support someone who supported gun control, really triggers a lot of like right-wing libertarians. And it somehow to them means that I also support that. But, I would support a conservative if he was anti-war and he was against the Patriot Act. And, if he was just bad on immigration and didn't want to cut enough of the military budget or something. Like if he was mostly good, then I would have supported him too. But you just don't find that very often anymore. You know, you either find someone who's like basically a libertarian, or you find someone on the left who can agree with you on most of the, you know, civil liberties and anti-war stuff. But it's really hard to find a conservative who's anti-war and like anti-surveillance who isn't a libertarian. You know what I mean? Like we just don't like see that many of them anymore, I guess.
I have a lot of family that's where I came from, was the right. So I see a lot of that. And the war, the war and some of the police are kind of the last bastions of the kind of hang on to. And I think some of that is, my grandpa was World War I, it's like you've got this patriotic thing going, and the wars are, for a lot of it's a good and evil. It's a distinction, the Nazis, the communists, Vietnam were over there fighting the Viet Cong. But then if you don't ever get an anti-war stance because a lot of, if my old days, and you see the Vietnam War as an example, the ones that were protesting it, they weren't like anti-war. They were almost pro-communist in a sense, the Book of Mao. So you're siding with them or not? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to side with them. And then, it's not till later in my life I find Rothbard and some of these other things. And I actually saw the Ken Burns Vietnam War documentary. And there was a guy in there. He was enlisted. He came out. He was protesting with, John Kerry throwing his medals and stuff. And then he was disgusted with what's her name on the, riding the Jane Fonda. And I was like, oh, interesting. He was a West Point guy, went over there. He was still a proud American. He just didn't like all his boys getting killed. And for me, that was a completely different way of looking at it. And I think for the right, you have to push them from that side. And now, the police are taking people with masks. You got to push them from that side. It's the Scott Horton way of arguing, I guess, with it. I think Dennis Miller once said, he made a joke about, people being PETA and animals. And he's like, do you think if it was the roles were reversed, the minks wouldn't be wearing you as a jacket? So these people, on the other side, you talk about Abby Martin. She's got bad politics and some things, but I think there's just enough of all of these where the roles were reversed. They're for your civil rights at one point, but if they were in power, I don't know.
Yeah.
On both sides, I'm just saying.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. Like that's why I tend to ally more with, like, if a leftist really cares about civil liberties and being against killing people, that matters more than a conservative who isn't against those things so much, but will align with me more on the social side of things occasionally, or like gun rights or whatever. Because like you're saying, if the roles were reversed, things would suck. So the conservative is kind of just like the liberal, just the flip side of the liberal. Like they just want to use political force to control so much of your life, or and maybe not my life, but certain individuals in this country. So if there's someone who just really disagrees with me on economics, but really cares about people's lives and the government destroying them, I'm going to tend to be more sympathetic toward them. But understand, like, that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice any of your principles to work in areas of agreement with these people. Like Abby Martin and I can completely agree on Israeli foreign policy relations, the CIA, ending the wars, ending the war on drugs, ending the Patriot Act. And then, it can end right there. Like if she wants to increase taxes or increase regulations on businesses or whatever, like, and be like, nope, I don't agree with you on that. I don't understand why people can't understand that you can work with anyone to do good and nobody to do wrong, which is that's a
profound statement.
I stole it from someone though. It's yeah, man, I'm blanking. Sorry, it's late at night, so I'm forgetting names. But
well, you're in Mountain Time, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Is there anything else you wanted to say? By the way, really appreciate you coming on here, giving me a chance to communicate and get to know you a little bit better. Maybe I'll see you out and around at some of these Liberty things, or if you ever travel through Sacramento, let me know. But anything you want to promote? I know we've gone over your list of shows here.
Yeah, sure. Just follow me on Twitter at Reed Coverdale, Naturalist Capitalist on YouTube. I'm also on Odyssey now, and I have audio versions of my podcast. I was like a month and a half behind, and I finally caught up yesterday, uploaded everything. So I should be maintaining that. Usually what I do is I go live on YouTube, and then it'll upload to Odyssey, and then I'll download the file and convert it to audio only, put it up on Anchor a couple days later. But yeah, thanks for having me on, man. We should do it again sometime. Like we can plan it out and, you know, go a little bit longer. And
totally. So. I just really appreciate you coming. And look, and maybe I'll need to run out here, but you know, you got a big Twitter following. I did a thing where I follow like 7 or 9 people, and those are kind of the ones I follow. So if I end up commenting too much, I'm not stalking. I'm just interested. That's all it is. So
yeah,
thanks so much, Reed. Everyone follow him, and hopefully maybe you'll set up a Patreon someday, and I'll start getting some money out of this. Or how's that going?
Oh, by the way, it's Frederick Douglass who said the quote. I just remembered that. Yeah, I'm probably going to do a Substack. Honestly, I don't even know if I want to do Patreon because, you know, my content. Like the other thing is like being as close as I am to Ryan. I've already had Gabe Hoff come after me. He's like this Zionist who tries to get anyone who speaks ill of Israel removed. So I just don't know like how long I have on the mainstream platform. So especially like for just generating revenue. So I'm probably going to do Substack. I don't know about Patreon. And Ryan can actually set me up with a bunch of different ways to make money. So I'll probably be doing that, but I would like to, you know, get a little bit more professional and a little bit more independent over time. Like this isn't how I make money at all right now. I mean, I do make some, I make money on the super chats, and on Odyssey, I get some donations, but you know, I still work 60 hours a week truck driving. That's how I make my money. So, well,
good job with that, and support him if you can when you get those things going. Once again, Reed, love it. Thank you very much. We're out of Afghanistan, so that's the new celebration. Talk to you later.
All right, man. Thank you.
Yep.